My name is Brian. My co-host for this podcast is Charles-André Jolly, and this podcast is called "What They Didn't Teach Us in School." The Jesuit idea is that 50% of your education is learned in the classroom, and 50% of your education is learned outside of the classroom. Charles and I formed this podcast to explore really the second half of that. Charles and I are both undergraduate seniors at Georgetown University, graduating in May, and really, we wanted to create networks and explore what other entrepreneurs who are really dominating their own industries are doing, how they come up with their ideas, how they solve many problems, how they address things in their field. So in this podcast, we interview Dr. Newton Howard, who is a neuroscientist and professor at Georgetown University. He holds more than 30 patents to his name. Dr. Howard leads many aspects of his own field. For example, he pioneered work in brain imaging, where he identifies different regions of the brain and how they work, how they contribute to cognitive processes. He also developed extraordinary theories of neural function about how the brain processes information. And he's made various discoveries in the field of memory. Dr. Howard is a professor at Georgetown University. Like I said, he's pioneered many aspects of AI, which is a pressing topic these days. And this interview sheds light into the mind of one of the most innovative, fascinating minds in the United States today. Dr. Howard is truly a leader of his industry.
All right, well, my name's Charles Jolly.
Brian Schroeder.
Today, we brought on Dr. Howard for our episode for what we didn't learn in school. Essentially, just some background information on us. Dr. Howard, basically, we're both entrepreneurs at Georgetown University. We're seniors and we're on our last semester. And what we have come today to speak with you is we feel that we've learned a lot at school, but also at Georgetown University, the Jesuits say you learn 50% of your education at Georgetown outside of the classroom. And I know I can say this personally, I know Brian can say the same thing. We've had many opportunities where we've learned a lot of cool information from people outside of the classroom, people who aren't professors or maybe just weren't our professors. And today we recognize, a very, very popular house in the Georgetown neighborhood is a Transformer house, and that's Dr. Howard's house. And we decided that we would hope to reach out to you, and we were lucky enough to get a response. We did a lot of research on you, and we're excited just to get into our conversation today. Would you like to maybe first give a bit of a background on yourself?
Sure. I'm Newton Howard. I discovered that I like to tinker with things since I was really, really young, and that led to me studying technical aspects of the human brain from undergrad all the way to grad and beyond. I grew up in Europe, in south of France and in England, and moved to the state in Galveston, which is south of Houston.
Wow.
Way when I was young, and ever since I've been traveling around for work for the government, for education.
Great. From Houston, so.
Yeah, it's a cool city.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's a growing city.
Of course. I guess building on that a little bit. So, you said that you're kind of involved in the government and academia and things like that. So,
Yeah.
Is there a reason in specific that that academia is kind of where a lot of your work comes out of, or why you're so involved in education programs, or how those adventures come out of that?
Yeah, my father was an educator, and I come from a family that respects education tradition, and I believe that being anchored or connected into the academic institutional world brings about the ability to actually produce more work that is accredited and have depth. And it gives me access to the libraries, the student exchanges, the faculty exchanges that you won't get if you're actually disconnected from that world. My work in government has similar veins. I actually brought some academic programs into the government into the intelligence community. He made a large emphasis on that the soldiers and the troops actually improve their academic skills during the service time. And it's just a big part of my belief system that education is something that on the paramount of sort of ultimate needs for people to progress.
Sure. Very good. So a little bit away from that vein, I guess I'd be curious to know what you see as something that you know that a lot of people or the rest of society may not know.
I see a lot of things, and the same thing as seen by other people.
Yeah.
But where I find relief is that I don't get worked up over issues like AI and inflation and COVID is hitting and all these things, because I'm solution oriented. So whenever I see a problem like that, I'm more interested in taking that energy or that anxiety and then focus it into producing a solution for that current problem or a problem that is to come, foreseeing it and then foresee a solution for it. Like sort of like the common themes of today is AI and things like inflation and viruses spreading and all these things.
So how do you go about when you recognize a problem? How do you, one, identify that that's something that you want to focus on, and two, how do you bring together the resources, people, or how do you find those teams that you need to make that happen?
I'll give you an example. For example, when COVID hit, we were working on a lot of technology that's focused for the brain, and there was one component of that technology that focuses on reading light gradients of protein traces, and we repurposed that technology for the early detection of COVID from IgG, IgM, and IgA, which is the protein traces that were omitted. And we completed that way before anybody else at the early stages of the crisis of the epidemic. You just have to have a little bit of knowledge, but much creativity and the ability to connect these dots in the different things that exist in today's market, because the solution could be right there under your nose and you just won't see it because you overlooking, or you're not looking in the right spot, or you're not seeing what you're looking for. So it would be right there staring at you, and you don't know that this is part of the solution.
And so I recognize that, you've studied at many universities, and you also have a lot of, impact with universities from Oxford to Georgetown University and MIT as well. Is there any particular process that you go about when deciding, okay, for example, like the Howard Brain Institute, I want to pursue that with, I believe that was Georgetown. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any particular decision as to, okay, this is the new focus that I'm interested in. I think Georgetown's the right, place for me to take that to, or is it on the flip side where Georgetown University recognized that you were in the space and that it'd be a good partnership that way?
It's generally the match happens on both sides, where you would have an institutional posture of welcoming, and you find colleagues and other people of the like mind that can actually participate in the project, and that kind of directs generally my opinion that this is the right place and this is the right time, because if you're going into an institution that partially recognize the value but are not welcoming you, then you will not get results.
Yeah.
If you go into an environment that doesn't have further colleagues that can actually work with you on the system, that you're developing or on a project that you're developing, then the same thing, you just won't get results.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sure. So, so you have so many patents. I'd be curious. Yeah, wow. I think I saw some downstairs as well. I'd be curious, kind of, obviously that they're all unique in and of themselves. But is there an end goal that you're trying to achieve with, things that you're working on, things of that nature?
Yes. So patents are developed sort of like trees. You start with a core concept, and then some other stuff emerges from it. Most of my work is about brain modeling, brain reading, brain writing to the brain. So read and write circuitry. Now and then I come up with a solution to a specific problem, like the virometer problem, from some of the systems that I've already discovered. The end goal is to actually solve the human brain, trying to understand that frontier and trying to understand the smaller elements that are coming out from this frontier and how the puzzle fit together outside of the actual chessboard. And once we get to understanding that, we would discover novel technologies and new kind of AIs and stuff that we have not thought through, we have not foreseen yet.
Yeah, so I saw the work that you're doing on the metaphors.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. How do you recognize something as high value in that sense, right? Like, I feel like there's so many things you could focus on with the brain. What have metaphors, I guess, drew your attention in?
So metaphor was of great interest to the government, to the intelligence community, and it was great interest also for us as researchers, because when two humans talking in metaphors, they understand each other. When two machines talking in metaphors do not understand each other, or even when a human and a machine talking in metaphors. So the goal was to come up with a way to have a machine understand metaphor and construct metaphor. That work led to great advancement actually in educational technology and supported testing and things like that, as well as helping analysts identifying what an adversary or a bad actor is saying in the chat lines or in some of the conversations on the internet and whatnot. So it was an important Pandora box of its time that we had to get into and answer. Later, we identified that their unique way of how schizophrenics construct metaphors, or people with basket cell damage or some other damage to the brain. So you can actually detect from a speech sample what's going on in this person's state of mind, but more importantly, whether there's an ailment or not.
Wow. And when pursuing a project like that compared to maybe IN-Q-TEL or CS9, when you find a passionate project, what's your process to building a team around that, building the culture for that? Because, as Brian and I are both entrepreneurs in our respective fields, very important aspect is those that you work with need to have, the same, I guess, culture, motivation, belief. Exactly. So are these projects that you first brainstorm out on your own and then deliver to others, or is it sometimes maybe the opposite, where they bring it to you and you develop beyond that? And then I guess lastly, what's your process to determining who you want to work with, right?
Right.
I'm sure with the reputation that of yourself, there would be many people interested in working with you, but what's your, I guess, method to determining who is best fit for a project I want to pursue?
Right. So the first thing is that I start with the principle, build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't focus on polishing the business model or the PowerPoint that is going to show what is the value proposition, who's my competition, all that stuff. I just start building what I envisioning, what I have in mind, and reflect all this things around that axis, and then you find people who come and attach themselves to that story based on either their individual stories, individual beliefs, in the case of fighting Parkinson, the majority of the people that work for NITO have families that are being impacted by it. Right?
Interesting.
So then you identify, then you have the person that have that strong connection to the project.
Right.
And it happens, it will happen by itself that they have that strong connection to the project from their personal belief value system.
Interesting.
So what do you mean by started and they'll come? When, in that sense,
Build it, they will come.
Build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
Is there do you measure, like, how do you know that you kind of, or is I guess they'll come just as you kind of broadcast it? Or?
Yeah. So you making the case of barometer again, making a barometer. Instead of talking about it, we just made it. We build it. And once you build it, then you have people talking about, do we do an acquisition? Do we do a license? Do we go direct market? Do we license and make mass production? That all these things happens as a product of actually producing the artifacts. If you're just going to talk about it, you will talk about it for a very long time before most people believe in seeing the prototype. That draws both the future workers, the future colleagues, the future model, the actual core of what you're anchoring everything around is the prototype. Some people disagree with that. They think that we should start with assessing whether the prototype is going to sell or not. I don't believe in that strategy. I believe in actually building it, and then everything else good would come from it. It shows fundamental belief in what you're doing.
Of course. So I'd be curious what some of the biggest struggles you've had, honestly, in your career, have been, kind of roadblocks you've hit, or things, times you've had to make a pivot, whether in a project or really anything.
Well, in biotech, it's always regulatory process. It's laborious, it's long. It requires that you have an active knowledge of the latest, what is this regulation says about this product or that product. So we run into that, and we adjust the purpose of use, the type of circuit, the type of electronics, what it's supposed to do in the end, and the messaging around that sometimes. But it's rarely, but it happened a couple of times.
So, I'm so curious, honestly. It's going to make us sound like business students, but so I've been told that AI kind of works via, or it's just probability, things like that. I don't really know exactly what that means, so if you're able to touch on it, kind of explain it a bit more.
AI is a set of codes, essentially, that composes a program of some sort that function outside of the structural way of how input-output works. It has its own input-output as well, but it has a variable of changing the output based on learning capabilities. And the learning capabilities is anchored in statistical and probabilistic models. It's the mathematical models that you feed it a set of data and information, classes of data and whatnot, and it sorts through that, it learns from it, and enhances the output. People aggravates that topic to a point of making it sound like you're gonna have AI that does things independently on your own and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, AI can do a single purpose, do it very well. Like you can have a lawyer AI, and he can pass the bar,
Wow.
or she can pass the bar, whatever, it pass the bar. But you cannot make it become a doctor simultaneously with the same set of data. You'd have to start from scratch and,
Wow.
and then train it to be a doctor and give a clinical opinion on things based on information, pre-fed information and whatnot. So in that respect, the ultimate AI is a child, how babies learn.
Yeah.
And we don't see that. We don't see that out there, neither in the structure, the engineering framework that is set around it, or in actually what exists.
Sure.
And so then, I guess, with your line of field, do you see AI playing a serious role on that? Is that a product or type of product line now that really benefits what you're working on? Or is what you're focused on, I guess, separate from that with your research?
Well, we have our own way of looking at AI, and we've been employing that into the technology that we built, because in the end of the day, we need to process the data that comes from the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to give instruction to the brain. So we need to know what kind of instruction that are sensible and useful, that is going to change essentially something that relates to the structure, to the function, or to the behavior of the person.
Right.
So that we use AI with that kind of focus. A person cannot say, well, can I take a chip off someone's brain after it was implanted, and therefore I have a copy of their conscience?
Mm-hmm.
That's nonsensical.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. So it has to be very specific to. It has to be built for a specific purpose.
Current AI is like that. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm sure you've heard of Neuralink.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what do you see as kind of the feasibility? Say, if I wanted to, get access to be able to honestly enhance my. I mean, ChatGPT can search anything, or
Right.
it knows pretty much everything. So,
Right.
is it possible that that could be added to the human brain? Is it something that you've seen any?
The interface between BCI, brain-computer interface, between the human and the machine being represented by technologies like Netro's technology or Neuralink, or others that are being worked on. His ultimate goal is to cure a particular disorder. If a person uses it that has no disorder, they have been reporting in some of the surgeries that we did in Oxford, where we enhanced the person's IQ. And it comes with the person that actually has Parkinson's and whatnot.
Sure.
The use of that technology specifically for the purpose of human augmentation and enhancement is way too early, because we have, hundreds of millions of people with psychiatric and brain disorders that we need to work through.
Sure.
And then learn from that how they operate on a normal human. Neuralink is a little bit on the highly exaggerated end of what can be done with this technology, because number one, flatly it sits on the surface of the cortex, so it sits in the sensory areas, and it doesn't travel deep into the brain. Everything that is happening at a high resolution is happening deep into the brain. So there are other technologies out there, I can't remember the name of the companies, that are working on similar to that, other than Netro. Netro's also working on deep into the brain circuitry. And when you get deep into the brain, then you can enhance memory, enhance different regions other than just the sensory cortex.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it's a bigger, or it's of higher value to focus on people with brain disorders and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Okay. So what are your thoughts on ChatGPT?
It's a very interesting tool. If it's used correctly, it obviously makes people, especially in academia, uh, have a little bit of a fear similar to what happened when Wikipedia came out,
Sure.
right? The students can actually
Sure.
do the work themselves, or they're gonna do something like, the chatbot, and then have it written for them, or things of that nature. So it's just got to be uh, more adapted into how we do things. So I see uh, nothing wrong with starting with the write-up set up by the GPT, and then you basically enhance it yourself. Sort of like what we used to do when we had in the early part of coding, when we used to have machine-generated codes. So you would run a program that write the actual program, and the lines of code were very extended and very long. So a software engineer, would go through it and actually correct it and enhance it. And anything that advances human knowledge, is absolutely welcome.
Sure.
Now, you're going to have these people, these individuals who basically will use it for just getting by, getting through.
Yeah.
After 30, it hits you what you missed if you actually skipped a block of knowledge or anything like that, and you will have all kind of regrets that I should have done that when I studied. Right. Only then when you're in your 40s or 50s or whatnot, I'm not going to go back to school to correct missing out on what is calculus. So if you have something that can give you a general understanding and a rapid education of just about every concept there is on Earth, why not?
Yeah, definitely.
It just accelerates the education, accelerates the learning process, and enhances the learning process.
Excellent. Wow. And when I was looking at your website, what I noticed is you've been a part of many projects. Are there any projects that maybe are not listed on the website that maybe didn't go according to plan, or that you had to let go of, or maybe pivot into what you're currently working on now? Are there any projects that may not have worked out that you really wish could have done, or maybe just wrong timing and better down the road?
Yeah, I remember in the mid-90s, I was working at Ford Motor, and we came up with a lot of projects that became the standard today for things like Skype and VoIP, voice over IP and whatnot. And it was a good project in the wrong place, where Ford felt that which and truly correctly so, that their first line of business is cars. And however much excitement we generated around discovering some compression algorithms or anything else in the software that can produce what became all these different technologies later, like Internet Explorer, Net Meeting, so forth. We had to kind of like file that as an experience and move on.
Okay.
There was a project called the Virtual Co-Location, which was quite interesting and probably even today unique and one of a kind.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow. So what do you say is kind of the biggest key to where you've gotten teams, people, the education, things like that today?
What is the biggest key?
Yeah, I guess more better way to say it is, so if someone wanted to kind of work on or contribute to society in the way that you are today, what would you recommend that they explore/do from, I guess, even like say freshman in college or something like that?
I say the art of exposure. The art of exposure is like how much knowledge, how much information, how much areas or sectors you can expose yourself to. And then the ones that just click, it becomes a natural attractor between you and that subject matter. You become curious.
Yeah.
Right? So there's an art to this, not science. Meaning, I couldn't design a curriculum that says it's going to expose you to a fraction of 1% of human knowledge.
Yeah.
But you can expose yourself to greater than that, greater than even 5% of that, by just being open to see these positive experiences, not negative experiences. A lot one can learn from learning about alcohol and immersing in drinking it heavily to the point that it hurts them, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the institutional knowledge is useful, but sometimes can get you to that point where you overload it before you even have it started yet.
Sure.
So it could be stylistic, could be content. You have to engage yourself into that art of exposure, into exposing yourself, although it was boring, although it could have been dangerous for me to. It's like learning about alcohol, but reading about alcohol versus drinking it.
Right.
You learn a lot about alcohol tracings in the human body if you took it from that angle, versus when you actually immerse into it.
Yeah.
And you drink it every day.
Yeah, it's fair.
Definitely.
It's fair. So, I mean, Charles was very curious about IN-Q-TEL. You can kind of ask some of that. I guess I was just curious, since what are some of the favorite projects that you can tell us about, if you can. How do you identify a winner with that?
Palantir was one of the most interesting, and Google Earth. And you identify them by looking at if this thing works, how many problems would it solve? And try to envision how many problems can it solve. Mm-hmm. And then you take that, and when I was involved, we would take it to the investment committee and try to convince them from scientific merits, supported by the business model, supported by some of the due diligence results that whether they produced or we're still talking about it and whatnot, and then you package that in such a way that convinces the investment committee to bring it to life. Mm-hmm. So these were two of the exciting ones. There was another one called network chemistry, and they started looking at protecting the devices from security threats to radio frequencies, to Bluetooth, ranging from Bluetooth to Wi-Fi and whatnot. When it first started coming out and being implemented, it wasn't like a big, to have a computer with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on it. You used to have to buy extra devices.
Wow.
And connect these extra things to it, and then you have a computer that is like jazzed up.
Wow.
Today is every basic computer has Bluetooth, have Wi-Fi, and when that happens, what would be the threats that these things bring? Mm-hmm. And this company actually worked in doing that, and it was quite interesting how they went about it, building libraries of threats and thinking about each possible threat and modeling it.
Sure.
And just to keep touching on IN-Q-TEL, I was doing some research on them, and it's, if I'm correct, I believe only 1% of IN-Q-TEL's investments are follow-on investments.
They have a very unique way of
right.
of investing. They're interested in disruptive national security.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I guess when you were, founding that and building that out, I guess what was your inspiration into, moving into that type of VC space and, bringing the CIA into that? what type of relations were you forming there, or rather were people forming with you to get that idea going?
So the idea stemmed from that we were behind in certain technology classes in relation to other international players and international members. It stemmed from that costs commercial technology off the shelves is the way to actually go forward and empower people. So the method of investment was something called work programs, and empowering them really quick when they're early, with the understanding that 1 out of 10 might make it.
Right.
So we would go after a number of investments to get them to build a prototype and to succeed, sort of showing to the next investment committee, to the next investor group, or the next level, A, B, C, whatever, and make a substantial return on it. To me, I was in the science and technology, more as a deputy chief scientist. My responsibility was to actually get things that are founded on a scientific ground, like really the science is solved, so that you don't get yourself in a situation where you're investing to solve the science. That's a very expensive enterprise. That's research, right? And you're not in the business of research. That would be DARPA, IARPA, and the other agencies that are there.
Interesting.
Sure.
Great. So I know we're running low on time, so I have 2 more questions for you.
Good.
A bit more light level. One, what we noticed when emailing you, and what I also noticed on your LinkedIn profile, I see a lot of Albert Einstein quotes and a picture of Albert Einstein. Is that a figure that is very inspirational to you, or where do you draw your inspiration from?
He is very inspirational to me because we both have some elements of what cataloged as learning disabilities, dyslexia, and things like that. And he starts with the physics. He starts with what he see, how things work, which is similar to my philosophy in thing. And just generally an amazing human being.
And then, I guess our last question to that would be, what do you find that you learned from your career that you may not have learned from, whether it's studying for your doctorate or your, just in graduate studies? What did you find that you have learned outside of university or outside of college that has really made a profound impact on your work today?
Human dynamic. Human dynamic can make or break just about anything. Something that could be extremely substantive and valuable, set in a box of human dynamic where there's a few toxic individuals who would destroy everything. So you have to try to grasp the human dynamic around you, or engineer the human dynamic as much as you could. Engineering human dynamic is like HR.
Right.
It's like you have the position, the line number, and what they're gonna do and whatnot. You can't really predict all the psychosis and the things that come with this individual, and you can't really even judge against it either, right? So you'd have to engineer it in such a way that, say, a person come in and say, declare to you the bipolar. You can't outright reject the position, and you can't, in good conscience, actually take them in without knowing are they taking their medication. When is the last time that they rubbed, right? So you mitigate it and you engineer it, and that's an extreme case of like human dynamic gone wrong. When we have people with heavy conditions like that. The quote-unquote politics of, the resultant is a politics in the human dynamics, as we see it every day in government sectors and whatnot, in government players. Certain things we should not play politics with, like science.
Right.
Right? Because if it's subject to human dynamics, in politics and whatnot, you can bury and severely damage human progress and stifle it in ways that is unacceptable. Just basically on the fact that you didn't pay attention to how this dynamic works.
Very interesting.
And schools don't quite teach that in a way that is systematic or can even teach it. So the only thing is, you know, the clubs in the different schools and the different fraternities and the different social organizations kind of give you a taste of that.
Right.
And then you develop it yourself and you realize it yourself.
Amazing.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
That's
guys.
phenomenal. Yeah.
Great.